Last week, we talked about a fairly sensitive and triggering subject of rape and how it relates to the abortion discussion and how it should affect the abortion discussion. This week, we're going to go a little bit into consent because obviously those two subjects are two very important and intertwined things. And since rape is a part of the abortion discussion, consent, I think, is an important thing to touch on. Consent, something that makes people's stomachs drop. Mostly because what one thought of as a great night can turn into horror with this word. What one person thought was consent, the other person might have seen as coercion. Thus, it becomes a tricky subject. However, one big aspect of the subject can change how complicated it is, and that is that consent is sexy. One reason situations can get confusing or dicey is because people think if I stop the motion of things to ask for consent, then that will kill the mood. So I'm just going to go off the signals I'm seeing. There is so much wrong with that thought process. First of all, as a man, if you stop something to make sure that the woman you are interacting with is actually consenting to what is about to happen, that will create an environment of safety and lead to her being able to relax, knowing that you actually care enough to take that extra step. Thus, rather than ruining the mood, it will create an even better mood where the woman feels safe and can lean into whatever desire she has without fear that you will cross the line. Second, signals are just dumb and never create a clear understanding of what someone wants or what someone is feeling. Especially in sexual matters, women always have the thought that it could turn bad fast. Thus, if they don't feel safe, but feel like they are stuck, or that if they change their mind or change what they want, it will turn from something she's uncomfortable with to a violent or violating situation, she's going to most likely try and make the best out of it. While you are seeing signals of consent, she's simply trying to get through it and get out of there with as little damage as possible. Having said that, I know that most men are not interested in forcing themselves on people and would not respond with violence. But the fact that it can lead to that so quickly causes extreme caution in most women's minds, often to the detriment of communication. One way to explain this divide is a man's biggest concern in a sexual situation is being rejected or getting his feelings hurt. A woman's biggest concern is getting raped or murdered. This way of interacting can cause men to become worried about engaging as well, because they might wake up thinking they both had a great night only to find out a few weeks later that she felt uncomfortable and subsequently violated. It doesn't serve anyone to not communicate, whether that is him communicating that he would like consent or her communicating that she is not comfortable with the situation. There is another aspect of consent that has come to my attention lately that I had never considered before. Imagine two situations. The first one, a man and woman, if you are not straight, place whatever gender of people in the situation you want, are sitting on the couch. They have just had a date and have returned to the man's apartment. They are not sitting right next to each other until the man starts to inch his way towards her. Once he's next to her, he starts touching her thigh and then starts to kiss her. Then he pulls back and asks if she's okay with what's happening. The second situation has the same parameters, but this time, before inching his way towards her, he asks if she would be comfortable if he got closer. After she says yes, he then asks if he can kiss her and waits for her response before touching her. In the first situation, it might feel sexy and anticipatory and spontaneous, but in reality, if he's already touched and kissed her and then asked for consent, it's a bit too late by that point. In this situation, if she wasn't really sure she wanted to do anything physical, she now knows that he's okay moving before asking and might be in that cycle in her head of, I don't want to do this, I'm uncomfortable, but I don't want this to get any worse than it has to be. Whereas in the second situation, he gives her the chance to say yes or no before he even gets close to her, before he's even touched her, thus creating an environment of safety, showing her that he is not going to take liberties until she actually consents. It's much harder to say no to someone who's already on top of you than to say no to someone who's on the other side of the couch. Consent should be and isn't all that hard to grasp, though some men know the implication of danger and choose to use that against a woman as a way to get what they want while appeasing their mind or gaining deniability in the process. A great example of this is from the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Two men are talking to one another. One says he's excited to get girls on his boat because they will essentially not have the option to say no to sex, because the implication that he could force her and she would have nowhere to run. The other man is appalled and states that he isn't interested in that because it sounds awful. The first man tries to clarify the idea by stating that he wouldn't actually do anything to the girl, but she doesn't know that. So in her mind, he could force her, but he won't. But she doesn't know that. This is a scary situation, and often what makes consent difficult to establish. However, if the yes she gives is not a definite or enthusiastic yes, it's safe to assume that going forward with the act is not the best option and should be reconsidered or postponed. Obviously, if you have to convince someone or coerce them to sleep with you, that is not consent. No matter who you are, feeling safe is the best aphrodisiac. And in order to feel safe, consent is key. If you are interested in commenting about this episode, you are welcome to. You can either send me an email at lawlessconversations@yahoo.com. That is LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS@yahoo.com. You can also comment on Twitter at Lawless Convos, LAWLESSCONVOS. Finally, you can also contact me on Facebook if you just look for Lawless Conversations, 2 different words, LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS. I look forward to hearing from you. The references to any sources that I use in each episode will be available in the bio, along with all of these social media connections. Join me next week as we talk about the concept of obligation and where it begins and where it ends, and some of the questions really that are involved in the idea of obligation when it comes to abortion. Thank you for joining me for this episode. I look forward to next week.